Hi, friends. Welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. Today, I have Jacob Lemanski with us. And Jacob, several years back, decided to get on a bicycle and see how far he could ride. And we'll get into the details of why he did that. But the end result was he went around the planet twice. He did 38,000 miles in 999 days. And we're going to talk about this epic bicycle journey. And Jacob, welcome to the program. So Jacob, let's start with where you are now, so people kind of have a context.
I'm in Denver now. That bike tour started and ended in Colorado, and this is where I call home.
Really? Okay. So this was about 10 years ago, more or less, give or take. And I got to know why. What was it that said, I need to get on a bike and just go and go and go and go?
You know, I just had this idea I would be a young, strong man once in my life, and I had to figure out what I could do with that. Um, and I had always been pushing myself in different ways. Every year on my birthday, I would run my age in miles. It'd be the farthest, longest run of my life every year. And so I was just kind of used to pushing myself, and eventually I decided to really go for it.
So had you been doing training for these birthday runs and for this long bike ride, or was it just leaning into I'm young and I'm strong and I'm doing it?
Yeah, I exercised for fun, but I never got into training. The runs were always hard, and the bike ride, right till the very end, I was getting in better shape.
Oh, that's cool. Well, I mentioned that because part of the Adventure Sports Podcast goal, one of our goals is to introduce people to new sports that they may fall in love with. And the reason for that is because connecting with nature, getting outside, moving, and becoming healthier, it enhances all the rest of life, I think. It makes your whole life better. And so I love the idea that there are things that people can just kind of lean into and try without doing tons and tons of preparation and then grow into the sport as their fitness increases and as their interest increases and all those sorts of things. So it kind of sounds like that's maybe where you were. What kind of a bike did you choose?
My bicycle was a Surly long haul trucker. It was a steel frame. It had road tires, but they were wide enough for dirt roads. And I had two bags on the front, two bags on the back, and I also carried a guitar, a narrow guitar with me, um, just to give me something to do while I was out there resting.
That's fun. So it doesn't sound like it was a light bicycle.
Without food and water, it was about 115 pounds. Loaded up in the desert, I'd have to bring more water than anywhere else, and I would at times leave with 50 pounds of water on my bike, and that would be the heaviest I would ever be. And I
Goodness.
would I would notice leaving town with that load too.
Wow. Well, I've done quite a bit of biking, but we're always going for as light as we can get. And at being over 100 pounds, what you just cited is on some rides you were starting out like 160 pounds. That's crazy.
Yeah, the 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 travel light thing, it's less necessary for bike tour since the weight is on your bike.
Right.
Um, but also, when I left, my goal was to be like a ship at sea. I didn't want to require any help or uh, anything else from anyone along the way. I wanted to start with everything I was going to need for the whole journey. So I was loaded down with a lot of, I had extra tires. Tires wear out every 6 or 7 thousand miles, and I was
Right.
planning ahead for that. But in other ways, I did cut corners. I only carried one shirt with me, and I would wear it until it became so full of holes, people would start to give me new clothing. So I tried to keep it light in ways too.
You know, a lot of people have seen Forrest Gump and the day that he just decided to run and he just kept going. It almost sounds like a parallel to that. Was there kind of a driving force that said, "It's time. I'm just going to go."
I'd been working up to it for years. Even when I had the idea to try and bike around the world, it was over a year before I actually started. I had to quit my job. I had to uh, build the confidence in myself to take that leap. The other thing, when I started, my longest bike tour prior to that was 2 months. So I thought maybe I would make it 6 months. The fact that I went for 3 years was not expected at the beginning. If I knew at the start that I would be gone for 1,000 days, I might not even I might not even have left. But that would have been a lot to take on. But to leave and just need to go one day at a time, that was something I was up for.
It quite often I think people look at massive achievements and they just seem like they're too big. It's too big of a bite to chew, and so they talk themselves out of it. But I like what you just said. Go one day at a time. See what happens.
I met another cyclist out there. I was in Alaska, and he was doing a very similar route to me. I had started in Portugal and crossed to China, and I went to Alaska to the southern tip of South America, and I crossed New Zealand, Australia, and 100 days north across Africa. And this guy kind of had a similar route in mind, but at the time I was just trying to go one more day,
Yeah.
and he had the whole thing planned out ahead of him. I was going one more day. He was counting down 1,000 days, and emotionally, it's just totally different and way more daunting to see all that road ahead of you. Um, I was able to stay very present, and I think it created a different experience for me.
That's a really interesting insight. I like that a lot. And they're different personalities, and different people like to approach things different ways. One example I like to use is 14ers. Some people like to check off the number of 14ers that they've done, and they're the ones at the summit that will say, I've climbed 27. How many have you climbed? And you're like, I climb mountains, dude. I don't know. That was always my answer,
Yeah,
because for me, it was about the experience of each peak. And it wasn't even necessarily about the summit. It was more about seeing the landscape and working your way up the trail. The summit, if you got there safely, the summit was just kind of like the icing on the cake. It was like, hey, we summited. This is cool, but what a great hike we had. It's a little bit different approach, but I totally get the people that like to check off. They set the big goal. They like to check off the peaks, check off the days, check off the miles. It's just a different approach.
yeah, we're all trying to motivate ourselves, and different things work for different people. Um, I personally, I loved riding my bike, and I wanted to sleep in beautiful places. Um, so to do those two things, which I love and didn't need motivation, um, it just meant I was bicycling around the world. But really, what
What a
I was
cool way to
doing was
approach it.
going for a bike ride and camping.
Nice.
It just lasted a long time.
So people are going to want to know about how many miles a day you had to do.
No, I would bike 5 or 6 hours a day, and in the worst terrain, that might get me 20 miles, and with a nice tailwind, maybe I could cover 70 miles in that time.
So it sounds like you were kind of taking it at a healthy pace. It's like whatever the day holds, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, it took time to get there. Certainly, I had a bike computer, and 50 miles was my goal every day. And if I got less than that, I'd feel a little bad, and if I got better than that, I'd feel a little bit good. And eventually, I just I didn't want my emotions tied to that. So I got rid of my bike computer, and I biked until it started getting dark, and then I would stop. And in a way, it freed me a little bit more from keeping track of what I was doing.
I helped to coach a mountain bike team that my sons were in. And so I put Strava on my phone so that I could track miles and times and that kind of stuff. And after riding with Strava for a little while, I realized I was constantly trying to do better than the last time. And I totally get it. That is a great approach to training and challenging yourself, setting your own new personal records. But I began to realize I wasn't enjoying the ride as much because it became all about the number on the screen. And you just said, I got rid of the bike computer, made life better. I actually found myself, oh, you know what? I'm not going to turn Strava on. I'm just going to enjoy the ride. And there is something about that that was liberating for me I totally get the numbers people that are looking for those personal records. That's great too. But I totally understand what you're saying. Get rid of the bike computer, and then you're just kind of in the present moment. That's nice.
Exactly. And you know, for a long for to go as far as I could, it wasn't just a physical thing. It was a mental thing. And yeah, absolutely, I needed to kind of protect myself from trying to go a little further every day, right? Because that gets harder and harder. I really needed to keep it at a level that was sustainable.
Right.
And also, you know, I also get it. To go so far, it's impressive. And it's especially impressive to the person doing it because we understand the effort more than anyone else. But at some point, for me, it was around 12,000 miles in. It just didn't make sense to count anymore. That's just not what I was out there doing. Even,
Right.
you know, I my trip ended up being 999 days, and all the time I get asked, why not one more day? And to bicycle one more day just for the sake of counting it after already going 999,
Right.
it's some sort of insanity. Um, the truth is, I had stopped counting around day 500, so it just happened to land on 999. Even if I knew, I would not have dawdled one more day. It wasn't the point.
That's fun. That's very, very fun. So you must have met amazing people, seen amazing things, encountered cultures that were very contrasted to the one you're familiar with. When people think of world travel, I think that those are often the things that draw us, right? But to do it on a bicycle where you're in the elements, you're moving at a pace where you can see all the things for a long time and absorb them. What was that like?
Yeah, on the bike, you're outside is one of it. You're in the weather. Um, and it's vulnerable. People can walk right up to me. I'm not even enclosed in a car for safety.
Right.
I'm out there in the world, and so it really forced me to um, just put myself out there and learn to trust. Um, I had this idea that I was doing a trust fall, and that humanity was going to catch me. And
Uh,
truly, anytime that I got in trouble, low on water, lost, I had my thing. I was a ship at sea. I didn't want to ask for help, but when I needed it, someone would offer, and then I would accept. And that happened at every critical junction that it needed to get me to the end alive.
did it change your ideas about humanity?
Well, that was my first time meeting humanity, so it certainly opened up
Uh,
my eyes. And the way I traveled on a bike, traveling long distance, you spend a lot of time in farm fields. Um, the cities pop up every few weeks, and then it's hundreds, thousands of miles between them. That's mostly farmers, shepherds, rural, and so I was mostly hanging out with the, not city people, rural folks who live close to the earth and were basically poor in most of the places I was in the world.
it reminds me of looking out of the airplane window. It seems like when we live in the cities, we start to get this feeling that the world is a crowded place. But then you get in the airplane and you look down, it's like, oh, look at all this open space. The cities are where everyone crams together. But did you start to have a different feeling about your day when you were going through a city versus the rural areas that you spent most of your time in?
Yeah, um, the cities were like a welcome change because I would be a week in farm fields and then a city would pop up and it'd be something new to experience. And it was totally fascinating just to see how they change from country to country. And I would just be passing through, so I wasn't getting a sense of the culture that much, but just seeing the architecture, seeing the people out, seeing just like getting the feel of the place. It was always interesting to go through. And then there's some consistent things on the trip that I would compare, as I went. Grocery stores. I'd stop at a new one every, 3 to 5 days, and get a sense of how it was different from the last one and how that slowly changed, as I traveled around the world. Cities were the same way. They had their similarities within countries and would slowly change to something else the further I went.
So Jacob has his own podcast where he recounts. I Jacob, I just listened to a little of this and I really enjoyed it. But you're recounting individual experiences that stand out in your mind, and it's in a kind of like an elongated story format. And I thought of it at the time. I mean, it's like pearls on a string, right, of time. And that's the way that we tend to remember because our mind compresses our memories so that we can hold more information, probably. But we tend to remember the things that stood out because they were somehow contrasted with everything else, right? So will you share with us some of those contrasted moments, things that stood out that you're like, oh man, that one was something else?
Part of my goal on this trip was to get far out, and whatever that meant, I wasn't even sure when I started. Um, but I did get far out, and Mongolia comes to mind especially. My beard had grown long by then. My shirt had deteriorated to the point where I wasn't keeping the sun off anymore. um, I was crossing the Gobi Desert. I was out there struggling to carry enough water, bumping into camels, getting stuck in the sand. It was a wild environment and really
Yeah.
hard to get myself physically across. Um, so, whenever I came to these places where people are living in ways that literally no one in the United States lives, it was always just so fascinating to me just to, see how other people are doing it. And honestly, I was always impressed that people really seem pretty lighthearted and kind and friendly, no matter what their living situation was. Um, in Mongolia, they were just in their little, they would sleep out with their animals, and no one seemed to mind that. And I was sleeping outside too, and it made sense. It's Even when I got back, I kept sleeping outside. It's nice once you get used to it.
Right. Huh. Very interesting. You know, I was trying to think of some of the logistics. So, just from the mindset of someone who's hearing what you're talking about, Jacob, and they're thinking, I wonder if I could. I wonder if I should. What advice do you have for people that are kind of entertaining that?
It's I don't always tell people they should go do it. It was
Right.
it was it was really hard, but anyone can do something hard. It was dangerous. I count about 10 times where I was saved by luck. Um, and it never feels good to be saved by luck. Um, and also to go for so long, for example, the woman I was dating at the beginning was married to someone else by the time I finished.
Mm.
So, like it affects relationships. And um, I'd say anyone could go for a year and step back into society, and not have too much be different. But to leave for 3 years, yeah, people move, their relationships change. It was hard to come back after being out for so long. Um, so I recommend it, but just understand it's to go for that long. You're biting off more than you can imagine at the beginning. Um, Certainly, anyone I would tell them just go ride a bike as far as you can, and it doesn't have to be as far as I went.
Did you find it difficult from a safety standpoint to be sharing the road with vehicles and things? Was that the big thing for you, or were there other issues?
Yeah, being on the road. There's different driving cultures in different countries. The U.S. is a very rule following country, and not everywhere was like that. And um, some places were really quite scary, actually. are very different. In China, for example, China felt very safe to bicycle because just their vehicles are underpowered.
Mm,
Everyone's driving around at 20 miles per hour, almost as fast as I could sprint on my bike. So just the fact that everyone's moving slowly over there really um, made me feel safer on my bike. However, no one would use their brakes. They would just swerve around each other. If a car was, say, a car was coming from the right to turn onto the road and take a right, there was no chance that they would look left. They would just come out and pull right. And anyone coming, they would shift into the oncoming traffic lane to go around them and then move
wow.
back into the lane. So, it flowed more like a river than like a fast bunch of fast cars following the rules. And I had to adjust to that. Um,
Right.
and that sort of every time I crossed the border, I had to be paying attention.
Well, you mentioned that you were saved by luck about 10 different times. Will you share a story or two when that happened?
I always think of my closest call. I was camping on the beach down in southern Argentina. In the morning, I had just woken up. I just stood up outside of my tent, and a wave came in and washed over my stuff and over me. It was up to about my chest when I was standing. It receded. I had to gather all my stuff, try to get it up higher, and um, it was a total mess. But if that wave had come any time in the previous 10 hours, I would have been zipped up to my chin in my sleeping bag and suddenly under 5 feet of water. I'm
Mm,
surely would have drowned. So, that was a luck of the timing. That wave didn't come till morning.
interesting. Tell us another one.
Um, Another one I got to this kind of broad valley in Central America, and the road split there. One went down the west side of the valley, one went down the east side of the valley, and I chose the east side. And that evening, I set up camp on a hill, and I was looking out across the valley towards the west, and a big fire broke out across the fields. And
Wow.
certainly, if I went down that other road, I would have just been camping out in those fields where I always camp, right where that fire was. I probably would have got caught up in the flames. So, that was just a fork in the road where I missed getting caught on fire.
So we've got
um,
water, fire. Do you have an earth story? Wind story?
let's see, the highest I bicycled was 17,100 feet in Bolivia. I bicycled up to the top of this mountain, and there happened to be a glass pyramid up there. This used to be an old ski mountain, I think the highest ski mountain in the world. So it's just some artifact left over from that. I arrived late at night because it took me all day to get up there, and I ended up sleeping in that little glass pyramid that I had no idea would be there. And the night got so cold that laying in my sleeping bag, I would hug myself for warmth, but there was also so thin that I would wake myself up short of breath because I was squeezing my lungs, and then I'd
Oh, yes.
try to adjust my arms to not squeeze so tight, and it wouldn't work. And everything became frosted. My water bottle froze inside of my sleeping bag, and I had a nice 0-degree bag.
Oh, wow.
Um, so if that pyramid hadn't been there blocking the wind for me, and I was just camping exposed up there, um, maybe I wouldn't have woken up when I got cold. I would have just froze up there. I'm not sure.
Crazy.
And then plenty of close calls with cars.
Right. Did you have a lot of mechanical repairs you had to do along the way?
The only thing that lasted on the bike was the frame. Really, everything else, even the handlebars, got swapped out by the end. So, yeah, I would replace the drivetrain, every once in a while, and the tires and wheels would wear out. Um, Basically, when I would get to a big city, sometimes I'd get into a shop and have them do a good tune up for me. Um, nothing that actually stopped me in my path on the road. Well, honestly, I take that back. I was biking in Tasmania, the little island south of Australia. I was doing a lap around that, and it's probably the most remote place I'd ever been,
Hmm.
and uh, and my pedal fell off, um, and my rear hub broke, kind of both at the same time. Um, and I was stranded, and the next town was about 55 miles away. And what do you do? You just start pushing. It's going to take me probably 2 or 3 days to walk there, but I mean, I had just been planning on riding my bike anyway, so it didn't really matter to me. Um, and I pushed for 24 hours before the very first car passed me. And
Oh, goodness, that's crazy.
they, yeah, they actually stopped and picked me up. So it worked out just fine. But I mean, that's the case, especially in remote places. If someone sees you're in trouble, they'll stop.
Did you learn some best practices that would keep you safer or help to minimize the negative unexpecteds? Were there some things that you said, okay, I'm going to always do this because
Yeah, I was careful not to stop in the cities to like have lunch. I would make sure I was like, out in a quiet space for that. I never wanted to have my things off of my bike or spread out in a moment where someone might approach where I need to get away quickly. So I always kept my kit really, really tight just in case I needed to leave. Um, and the other thing I would do is I wouldn't talk to anyone that didn't want to talk to me. I'm out there, I'm on my bike, I'm approachable. But if someone didn't want to chat with me, I never forced myself on them. And this way, I only met the friendliest people that were interested in me. Especially since there was a language barrier, then they're okay with having to deal with me not not understanding them.
right.
Versus me going up to people and trying to make conversation with someone that's maybe uncomfortable talking to a foreigner or something like that.
It sounds wonderful. One thing that I'm picking up just kind of globally is you start to relate an experience and you say, well, yeah, in Mongolia and then in Tasmania, and there was this time and very few people in the world when they go through their memories connect them to locations literally anywhere on the planet. That's a part of your life now. And I believe that our life experiences shape us. So, can you share some insights to that? Do you feel like your experience traveling in this way contributed to who you are today?
Yeah, of course. It's the trip was from 2013 to 2016, and I haven't spent even a single day not thinking about it. It's totally affected me.
Wow.
Um, I've become very calm. It's something I learned bicycling around the world, how to be patient. Um, and people always sense that in me. Um, and that gave me an outstanding amount of confidence. Um, my podcast is called How to Move the Stars. It's a
Hmm.
it's a day by day retelling of the journey. I kept a journal and I have edited it and I read it. I want to take people on that whole journey with me. And the name How to Move the Stars that comes from in Alaska, the North Star. It's way over my head. It's almost straight up. Um,
Right.
And then as I traveled south, I got to the border of Mexico, and someone had given me a bunch of pot in California, and I didn't want to smuggle it into Mexico. So my last night camping, I just smoked it all. And I was out there staring up at the stars, and I found the North Star again, and it was lower in the sky. And I realized just by moving my legs, I had moved the stars in the sky. And the North Star continued to drop towards the horizon as I traveled south, and then the Southern Cross came up.
Right.
Just by just with the strength of my own body, I was moving the stars in the sky. what a profound thing to know that I can do.
Yeah. It is amazing. It is amazing what can be accomplished a little at a time if you're just persistent and consistent and just keep going. There have been many times where just keep going is what saved me. And
Yeah,
I'm sure that, people need to learn those lessons sometimes, but to be able to literally change the sky just a little at a time, imperceptibly until, the days turn into weeks and the weeks turn into months and fascinating. It's a unique perspective, isn't it?
yeah, and you have to notice too. You got to be aware. I met I met a man. I forget his name, but he was breaking the record bicycling across Africa. He was going from Cairo to Cape Town. I think 34 days was the record, and he's planning on doing it in 30.
Wow.
He was biking, 180 to 300 miles a day. He had a Chase
Oh,
fan. I think Michael Strasser was his name, and I met him out there in the middle of his run. I was headed north, he was headed south, and he was off his bike just for 10 minutes just to give his butt a break. It was around 5 p.m. and I was starting to look for a place to sleep, and he was planning on biking another 120 miles that night. Um, he was maybe 20 days into the trip, and I was about 940 days into my trip. Um, and as we talked, I asked him, is the is the record important? Because any sort of record would have long ago lost its importance to me on my journey. Um, but for him, that he answered. He said yes. It's I could see it was the only thing important to him.
wow.
And honestly, if you're biking 300 miles a day, breaking the records really got to be the motivation because there's
It
no,
better be, yeah.
no, yeah, nothing else would get you to do that. Um, but I wonder if he noticed that he was moving the stars because he would have went far enough to do it. But I just don't think that's where his focus was.
Fascinating. We tend to find what we're looking for, see what we take the time to observe, you know? And I will say, we've interviewed a lot of people that were going for the big goal, whatever it was, the record. And some people, it's personal records. I want to do better than I did last time, like we talked about. And for some people, it's I want to be the fastest in the world at something, you know. And people have different motivations for that. So it's not always that, I want to be the best at something. And what happens with that is that even if you are the best at that one thing, that will only be for a short season of your life. If you set the world record, someone's going to come along and beat it. And not that that's bad. You can always say to yourself, wow, I pulled it off once. I did the thing. But I used to tell my kids, there's always a faster gun. If you take up gunslinging, not that we do that these days, but to use an old Western metaphor, if you take up gunslinging, eventually there's going to be a faster gun. Someone's going to get you. And so while it's fun to chase after those big goals, I find the journey itself to be what's more meaningful. And I would bet the gentleman that you related to us, when he reflects back on it, it's like, yeah, the achievement was certainly something that I feel really significantly about. But it starts turning into how it felt to go 300 miles day after day after day, or the little challenges he had to overcome along the journey, that those probably have more of a lasting impact. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm speculating, but that's been kind of my experience. What about you?
Yeah, the journey changed you, and the results get you something to brag about. Um, for myself to go as far as I could, it's very personal. Um, I'm the only one that can achieve that. Um, and the concept to just keep going. Even the moments I wanted to quit, I was out in the middle of nowhere. There was no way to quit. I had to keep going,
Right.
especially at the end when I got to my last day. I had this idea, only getting to a place where I could go no farther would I know that I went as far as I could. I really had to go until I quit. And that happened out on the side of the road in Africa, about 950 days in, maybe 37,500 miles. And it just didn't make sense to go farther.
Wow.
And, but there was no one coming for me.
Right.
It took me another 50 days to get home.
So you got to the point of, okay, I'm done when I can be done. What were those? It
Basically.
seems those last 50 days, I can imagine would be so much harder than the 949 before that, you know?
They were, and even though I didn't have, wasn't as clear cut as climbing to a summit and walking back down, it was kind of a high point, or at least a far point in my journey, which I would consider to be the southern tip of South America. And from that point, it felt like I was on the return journey. I was making my
Mm.
way back home. And even just being very present the way I managed to be out there, um, the way out is invigorating and the way back is waiting. And, um, soldiers used to have to walk home from the war.
Wow.
Explorers would sail home at the pace of the wind. I could have hopped a flight home, but I didn't want to take that experience away from myself. I wanted to feel that return journey and what that was like. And emotionally, it was way harder to be counting down than to be counting up.
I totally get that. I haven't given a lot of thought to that, Jacob. That's an insight. I think all of life there are parallels to what you're talking about. And the idea that the first 14er I ever climbed was Pikes Peak. And I climbed it from I climbed it from Oklahoma, meaning that, I wasn't acclimated to the altitude, and it was very hard to get up the first big mountain. But there was a car at the top that took us back. And
Oh,
so I didn't have the return trip down, which Pikes Peak is about 26 miles if you do the up and down. So I only really did half of that. And I've climbed dozens of peaks, scores of peaks since then, and I've always thought I really need to go back and do that one again because I didn't walk back down. I didn't have the return trip.
just drive to the top and walk down this time.
Well, and it's not because I need to check a box. It's something about your own like life experience. It's I want to do the thing,
Yeah, of
the
course.
undone thing, you know. And I get that when you're saying, yeah, I needed the return trip. Go
Well,
ahead.
yeah, I didn't know that's how it would feel, right? But it was definitely hard. It got harder and harder. Um, and those last 50 days were, um, in a way, totally painful. I just wanted to be home.
Sure. Yeah, I totally get it. What did you expect home would be like? Let's talk a little bit more about the reentry. I'm sure that there were some surprises when you said, "Okay, I'm home. Now what?"
I met a man. Um, so the very end of the trip, I flew into New York City. I bicycled down to Philadelphia to visit my sister and into Pennsylvania to visit my parents. Um, and on that trip down to Philadelphia, I met another man from England, and he was just finishing his around the world bike ride. Um, he had been out for about a year and was just about 2 weeks from finished. And I was the same way. I'd been out for years and was about 2 weeks from finished. And we just sat on the side of the road and talked for over an hour. Um, and neither one of us mentioned even for a moment what we were planning on doing next. It had never occurred to us to think about. We were here, we were present. To think about what was next would have taken me out of that. And that's just not how I was living my life at the time. I only thought about today. So, I returned back into society, um, in that way, like without any forethought. The challenge was Well, like I slept in my hammock another 8 months after I got back. I had trouble letting go of the trip, and the hammock was comfortable. It didn't make sense to sleep inside. I stayed out there even another winter. I got a room, but I kind of ended up setting myself up in the garage where I could feel the temperature, and also with the door open, I was kind of half inside and half outside.
Right.
And I was inspired. My bike journey, inspirational was is just the easiest way to to explain it. It was so big in my life. And my background is engineering, so I hadn't got to build anything for years, which is also something I enjoy. So when I got back and inspired by that journey, I wanted to create something beautiful. Um, and while I traveled, the only thing I missed from the life I left behind, not a shower, not my friends and family, um, I missed this ant farm that I had. I missed it like a pet.
Okay, so I want to hear the rest of this, but people would not see that coming.
No, of course not. But it was like I said, I missed it like a pet. And
Wow.
I got home and I got this ant farm restarted. It was, two pieces of plastic. I had kind of built it myself and set a light bulb behind it. And I just out, you know, I was so patient. I could watch ants dig a tunnel. I conceived to build the world's most beautiful ant farm. And over the next 6 months, I came up with a concept and I built a whole installation in my basement, including the world's largest ant farm, which is 8 feet wide and 4 feet tall. The background is this nebula. I embedded lights in the frame to illuminate the background to then shine out through the tunnels. And it was this fascinating, trippy, living art piece. And I had filled my basement with these things. And so I had circled the earth twice on a bicycle, which is a far out thing to do. And then I built these psychedelic living ant farms in my basement. They were hanging all over the walls. And man, I just felt so far out. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. Um, they were beautiful, but they were really strange. And inspired by a strange bike ride. It was, I don't know, it was almost all too much. It took, the truth is, it took me about 2 years to just calm myself down enough to just go get a normal job. And I was out of money at that point too. So that was the other motivation.
Sometimes we need that out of money kick in the seat of the pants.
I emptied my cup is the way I think about it.
Right.
I went on that journey to give it my all, and I did. I put everything I had into it.
Well, I know that there's a place where people can see some of your ant art, is a way to think of it, right?
The ant art, you can see it at antlife.space. Um, it's I do time lapses of them. They're really far out, interesting art pieces. Um, I'm still waiting for them to catch on, but one of these days.
Well, it's an interesting thing. I think people probably don't understand it until they kind of encounter it. So antlife.space lets people see what you're talking about. And I out in the forest, you sit down on the ground to rest or for whatever purpose, and the ants suddenly appear. They're around you. They were always around you, but you didn't know they were there. And then you see one that's carrying something bigger than it is. And it's struggling over obstacles that are smaller than your tip of your pinky finger. You could just thump it and it would, I mean, you're like a god to these ants. But here's the point. You see this ant and you watch him and he's struggling with this massive, massive load. And I can watch him maybe cover 6 or 8 inches. And I'm like, okay, that's enough of that. I'm moving on to something else with my attention at that point. And that partially is because I've not ridden around the world multiple times on a bicycle, you know. But here's the kind of the kicker is that they're always around us and they're always working so hard and they're doing feats that are just amazing. I mean, imagine picking up something that's 5 times your body weight, and moving it for the day. But then you see the ant mounds in the forest here in Colorado, and some of these ant mounds are huge. They're many feet across, several feet tall, and the ants are working and working and working. And it's almost a testament to what can be accomplished by very, very small things over a long period of time with cooperation, with determination. And I can see a real parallel there between riding your bicycle around the world and what ants are doing. And where would the world be without these type of colonizing insects? We would be in serious trouble without them. Think about the bees. Wow.
Yeah, for sure. You're right. Ants are everywhere in the world. Since I was outside all the time, I was, encountering them every night. What I would do is, after I was done cooking and eating, I would put my pot next to an ant hill. And like I said, every night there's ants around, so I would go find one, and they would do my dishes for me. If it was a big ant hill, they would clean it really good. If there's a little ant hill, maybe they wouldn't quite get to it all. But for years, I let the ants do my dishes. I literally never washed them myself. It was a waste of water, and once I realized the ants could do it, it became a waste of time too.
That's hilarious. What a fascinating story. That's really, really fun. Now you do other things though. You do bike tours.
Yeah, now I'm taking people on bike tours around Denver and into the Rocky Mountains. I got e-bikes so that people can handle the climbs, and honestly, so that I can handle the climbs too. I'm not I'm not as fit as I was when I was biking around the world.
Well, if you're not doing it every day, then you're certainly not going to be doing it every day. I mean, that's stating the obvious, but that's what it takes, you know, to stay in that
Basic,
kind of
yeah,
condition.
yeah,
But it's called Mountain High Bicycle Tours. Explain what these tours are like so people have an idea. I mean,
yeah.
bicycling can be anything from tootling around the block, on a sidewalk to the most extreme things you can imagine. So what do you do?
Yeah, my tours are they're a little more casual than biking around the world. I take people on day tours mostly. We go and explore the mountains on dirt roads, and then we'll always make sure to stop at a brewery on the way home to just get a little local flavor. Colorado is just so beautiful in so many ways, and I've been
Mm.
exploring it for years. I know the good spots for anyone coming in from out of town, and that's really what people need. When they arrive somewhere new. Just someone to show them where to go.
Well, share that website with us again, so if people are interested, they can find it.
Uh, yeah, it's mountainhighbicycletours.com.
Mountain High Bicycle Tours. Very cool. Jacob, it's been a blast talking to you, and we could go on for hours and hours about this. I mean, you have years of this, 999 days of stories. So, I mean, people need to go to that website to hear more. Howtomovethestars.com, right?
Correct. How to Move the Stars, and search that on any podcast player. It'll pop up as well.
Oh, that's a lot of fun. Well, the part of it that I listened to, I thought, oh, if I can find the time, or I'm in a place where I just want to chill and do some armchair travel, I thought this is good stuff. So anyway, Jacob, will you leave us with maybe something inspirational that you learned in your life, maybe on the bike, maybe watching the ants, but what would you like to leave for our audience?
Well, one thing that I always have to remind myself is that things take longer than you expect. And
Mm,
I would say most of my success in life has come from consistency. And
uh,
for someone that can ride a bike 1,000 days in a row, consistency is the thing.
wow.
So if anyone that can build that into their life, it's been helpful for me.
I love it, and I agree with it. So, well, Jacob, thank you very much for being on the Adventure Sports Podcast.
Thank you so much, Kurt. Have a good day.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. Take care. And for all the listeners out there, as always, until the next show, do get out there and have some fun.